Welcome, everyone, to another in our series, which has ended up becoming quite a long series. But it's because there are so many places of pilgrimage in the world to go and see, and there are so many wonderful people that we can ask to and speak about these places who have gone on pilgrimage. And so we're really excited that we have with us tonight Thomaida Hudanish, who is a person that I've known for a while and appreciate a great deal. But I was really excited talking to Dr. Timothy Patitsis last week about possibly speaking, and he really wanted Thomaida to come on, and he told me a little bit about a joint venture that they're doing together. They're beginning to make films that have to do with places of pilgrimage, of Orthodox pilgrimage. Maybe you'll explain it a little bit more to us, Thomaida, called Beauty First Films. And they're still in production of the first one, but it really promises to be something wonderful. So we're so glad that we could have her on to speak about her experience of a pilgrimage to Patmos. She was there 3 weeks ago on the island of Patmos, so it's all very fresh in her heart and her mind. So we know that this is, of course, the island where St. John, the theologian and evangelist, was exiled, and also where he received the revelation, or the last book of the Holy Scriptures. So we'll certainly hear about that tonight, as well as other places, pilgrimage and places of veneration on Patmos. But it's somewhat coincidental that there are only 3 saints in the entire 2,000-year history of the church who are called the theologians. John is one of them. St. John, the evangelist, the beloved of the Lord, and he's called the theologian. Then there's Gregory the theologian, one of the 3 Cappadocian fathers, and the third theologian is Saint Simeon, the new theologian. Now, he's called new theologian. He lived 1,000 years ago, but still for us, he's the last of those to be given the title. Although there are some today, some saints of the church that many say, really could potentially also be given that epitaph. And so we're actually going to do a liturgy for Saint Simeon tomorrow. We don't normally do it, but I didn't have any other liturgy this week, so we're going to start off opening prayers, a hymn, the dismissal hymn of Saint Simeon the new theologian. Since thou hadst received within thy pure soul God's enlightenment, O righteous Father, thou wast shown to the world as a blazing light, which drave away its thick darkness and moved all men to seek the grace of the Spirit which they had lost. O Holy Father Simeon, intercede with him to grant great mercy unto us who honor thee. Lord, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for bringing Thomaida to be with us and to speak to us about your beloved disciple, John, the evangelist and theologian, and her experience at his monastery and the other holy sites on Patmos. We ask that you bless our conversation this evening with an awareness of your presence, that we may all speak a word that glorifies you, and that we may know and love you as they have known and loved you. So bless all those who cannot be with us this evening, and watch over our families and all those whom we call to mind this evening. For you are the one who blesses and sanctifies all of us, who are all pilgrims on this earth, seeking your citizenship which is in the heaven. And to you we give our praise and our thanks, together with your beginningless Father, your all holy, good, and life-creating Spirit, now and forevermore. Amen. So I've asked Thomaida to give a little introduction about herself. Um, you are a convert to Orthodoxy, I believe, at some point. No, you were born cradle Orthodox. Oh, you fooled me. It was that last name. It just didn't sound Greek or Russian or anything else. It normally is.
Yes, it's a little tricky, so absolutely understandable. But and I'm actually I feel a lot of the convert story because my parents converted to Orthodoxy
Okay.
um, before I was born, and but my last name is Slovak, and that side of the family we believe was ancestrally Orthodox. So,
Okay.
but it's morphed a little from Ellis Island or whatever happens when you come to the States, and so my parents, after they met and married, they converted to Orthodoxy together.
Do you recall what it was in that more ancient Slovak
Oh,
pronunciation?
well, it was Hudanish, so it's
Udon.
very similar, but the ending was more of a ch instead of a sh.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So, thank you so much. It's such a joy. I received a call from our mutual friend, Dr. Timothy Patitsis, last Wednesday when I knew you were looking for somebody to talk about Essex, and I, I actually was just in Essex as well because that was part of this whirlwind tour that God allowed me to have happen in the last few weeks. But uh, Dr. Tim was saying that there's this group that's meeting weekly to talk about pilgrimage. And I thought, what dream of a parish is this happening at? So I think that is such a beautiful and worthy thing because I feel in my life that, one of the great blessings and joys has been to learn about all the holy people and holy saints. And our church and our tradition is really blessed with a lot of beauty. And all of these places that I've been have just been incredibly beautiful in a physical way as well as a spiritual way. And so I think it's such a good topic to spend time and to think about and to inspire each other to go on pilgrimage, to think about how you might dedicate your travels and your vacation time towards growing closer to God through these places. And I was delighted to hear that it was Father Theodore Petrides' parish. I'm in Portland, Oregon, so I'm pretty far away. But because I had a priest for many years, he's no longer my parish priest, but he's a very dear mentor and friend to me still. But he was my parish priest for many years, and he went to seminary with Father Theodore. And I don't know about all of you, but sometimes when your priest will continue to tell you stories from seminary, some of the very formative things that happen and the friendships they made. So I always felt like Father Theodore was part of my extended spiritual family through those stories. Um, and, through that time, that special time in seminary when you were together with my priest. So that's a beautiful thing. So here we are. I'm gonna share. Father Theodore had mentioned maybe to say a couple words about Essex just to transition us over the Patmos world. So um, uh, I will repeat. I'm in Portland, Oregon, so I'm 3 hours earlier than all of you. So um, I I have lived here my whole life, and I've been working. Well, I'll tell you a little more about Beauty First Films in a minute, but basically, I had an opportunity about a month ago where another friend from my parish here in Portland, she had this trip planned and she was going to go to Essex for a week and then she was going to go to Patmos and she was going to go to Cambridge and then to Patmos. And she kept telling me because she knows that I've been to Patmos before and I'd been wanting to go to Essex and praying, and hoping to go there, but they'd been closed for the last couple of years. And I said, I can't go. I can't go. I'm working. Da, da, da. Well, my job came to an end in an unexpected way, but not a bad way. And I said, well, and then this other project that I had been working on, a film for about St. Amphilochios of Patmos, we came to the end, the finish line of that. So we're actually finished with it. Um, and all of a sudden, all of the doors just swung wide open, and I quickly made plans to join her. And it was a dream come true. But I knew that if I didn't go in this window, it would close, and I wouldn't be able to go next month or the month after. I just needed to go. So glory to God, I went to Essex, and I listened to Dr. Mary and Dr. David Ford's presentation from last week. That was great. I learned a lot. And I know that I don't have to, go into explaining many of the things there, because you got to see so many updated pictures and talk about the Jesus Prayer service. But I will say, for me, that I I had some specific things I wanted to talk to some of the sisters about. I got to do that, but I really prayed to like learn more about Saint Sophrony and to kind of understand the character of the monastery, because it is a unique place. And it was a really beautiful week in that I met a pilgrim the first day we arrived, and I said, how was it? How was your week here? Tell me, do you have any tips? And she said, well, I really got my feet under me when I started working with the nuns, or the monks. And so she said, I would ask to see if you could have a blessing to work with them. And so that was kind of my goal. As the first day I just started, helping out with some tasks, and I got to know a lot of the sisters that way. So that was a really big blessing to work with them. And as you mentioned last week, super international place, 14 different nationalities. I was there for the feast day of Elder Zacharias and then the feast of the Nativity of the Theotokos. So those were really beautiful to see how the monks and nuns also come together to celebrate, in a spiritual way, but also they have a special meal on those days, and they congratulate everyone on their feast days. And it's really special. And then on the last day, so it's apple season here and in England, and that we were working in the kitchen after lunch on Friday, and they were just talking about apple season's really quick, and we have to use all these apples really fast, and we have to cut them up, and we have to figure out ways to use them. And they were, talking about different recipes and apple cake, apple this, apple that. And I said, well, an apple pie. And they're like, apple pie? Tell us about apple pie. And I'm like, oh. So they don't make apple pie in England or Romania or Cyprus. So like the sisters were very interested. And all of a sudden, before I knew it, I was making like the largest amount of apple pies I will probably ever make in my life. And it became like a huge operation that consumed the final 24 hours of my stay there, because we had to get 12 apple pies on the table, and go to all the services and sleep, and so it was just like making crust and cutting up apples and rolling out dough and teaching them what it even is the whole time. And it was so memorable and amazing. And now I'm making pies at home and just thinking of them every day. So that's my special memory of entering into the life of the monastery and getting to share their labor with them. So
Yeah, a nice ending point for last week's talk and transition now.
yes, so I'm going to go ahead and start my slideshow. So the Patmos is extremely beautiful. You could photograph it from every angle. It's just breathtakingly beautiful. It is the only Greek island I've been to. So I don't know how to compare it to all the other things. I think there are lots of things that are very typical, like when you see images of Santorini or Naxos or Mykonos, like there's some things that are the same and other things that are quite different. And of course, one of the ways it stands out to us, as Father mentioned, is that it's the place of exile for St. John the Theologian in the 1st century, and the place where he received the divine revelation. I wish I had the map where it shows where it is. It's very close to Turkey, so it's part of the Dodecanese. It's near Rhodes and Leros and Lipsi. We could get onto Google Maps and do that, but for now, I do have another map that I'll show you of the island itself. And so I'll introduce how God called me to Patmos through telling you about this film project that we started. So some of the photos in this were taken last month, and some of them were taken in 2019. And this photo is from 2019, from April. Our friend Dr. Timothy Petitsis is seated there on the right side of the screen, I believe. And then there's a little crew of us that are working on this film. And then the person taking the picture is the 6th member of our small documentary film crew. And really, God called me to Patmos through Dr. Timothy Petitsis, because I believe it was when he finished his dissertation in the early 2000s, he went to Patmos. He has Greek heritage, so he often finds himself in Greece with family, etc. But he went to Patmos and he venerated the grave of Amphilochios, who was not a saint at the time. And he was so overcome at that moment with a feeling and a sense of the holiness of this man, this elder, this beautiful saint, that he made, a personal pledge that he would come back for his first feast day after he was canonized. And that always stayed with him. So St. Amphilochios had a special place in his life and for his family. And so, this was on his mind. We met through our work in the church. And then my current parish priest called Dr. Tim out to give a retreat in the fall of 2018. Well, this is when St. Amphilochios was canonized, was September 2018. And I had been talking to another parishioner about maybe doing some films and learning, to maybe make some films about orthodoxy, but just really beautiful films about the holy places associated with our faith. And Dr. Tim said, I've been thinking about making films as well. And over the course of several Zoom meetings on the topic, with the three of us, the filmmaker, myself, and Dr. Tim, we decided to get a small crew together and go to Patmos. And we filmed for 4 days on the island of Patmos about St. Amphilochios. And we interviewed people who had known him. There are lots of people that are still on the island who were small children when he was alive. He died in 1970. And they have stories in their families of, confessing themselves to him as children, or their parents knowing him, or fishing with him, or different stories around the island still really remain part of the everyday culture, and thankfully not so much time has passed that he's forgotten there. And then we actually filmed Holy Week and Pascha in Jerusalem, so that will be our second film. We just finished the first one. It is not released yet. That is the next task on my plate, is getting it ready for releasing. We've submitted it to a couple of festivals, and I'm happy to say that it was accepted into the Houston Greek Film Festival, and I'll be showing next month in Houston for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a couple other that we're waiting to hear about, and then we're going to be organizing some screenings ourselves. And if I'm ever in Eastern PA, I will let you know, because I think there's a good likelihood that will happen. So and then we'll be streaming it, so it'll eventually be available for streaming. It's 30 minutes, and it's all based on interviews with people that either knew the saint, or like Dr. Tim, he didn't know him personally, but he really studied about his life and has a veneration for him. And so I'm very pleased. I mean, it's my first venture, filmmaking venture, and I'm pleased with how it's worked out. And it's been a grand adventure, because as you can see, it took me to Patmos and introduced me to the saint, but also to this holy place. And so I'm really grateful that God has worked that miracle in my life. So here's the island of Patmos. This is the shape of it, which is kind of nice to become familiar with, because the Dodecanese, when you see them all on a map, it's hard to pick ones out. So this is what Patmos looks like. And just, because I hope you're all going to go there yourselves, I wanted to share just that, the ways to get there that I know of. There's no airport. So you either take a ferry from Piraeus in Athens, a ferry from Rhodes, or a catamaran from Kos. So you can fly to Kos, apparently, and take a catamaran. It's apparently that's the least strenuous way to go. The other ferries are 8 to 9 hours, so they're like overnight ferries, and you usually book a cabin. And if you can, that's a nice way to do it, because you usually arrive around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and then kind of, if you are renting an Airbnb or you have a hotel, they will usually arrange for a taxi or someone will come and pick you up at the port. And the port is Scala. It's not shown on the water, but it's right there in the very middle. It's called Scala, and that's where the ferries come in. And that actually marks a very important place. So everything north of Scala, that part of the island is much less populated. It's like a little bit less touristy. And I actually have only been over to that other part of the island one time for a couple of hours, just to try to see what was there. But I didn't get very far because I mean, there's farms, there's a lot, but it's more rural, and that's more known to the locals. But there's also a lot of, I'm sure there, beaches and cafes and things, but it takes a lot more, adventure, some spirit to find all those things on the north part of the island. But the south part of the island is where the monastery of St. John the Theologian is, where the cave is, where the other monasteries are, many of the hermitages, and a lot of the touristy communities. So the largest communities are Scala, and these are just villages. There's only 3,000 people on on the island itself.
Oh, heavens.
Yeah, so Scala, it's a village, but it has, the grocery store and the port and all of that. And then Hora is up above. And I believe, like, does Scala mean below and Hora mean up above? There's something about that. I don't know.
Well, Scala is like ladder, right? The word. So you have this sense of going up in height, and Hora that has the same connotation with the ground, I think.
Okay.
Or certainly like something a space. I'm trying to think
Yeah.
what words in Greek. So
But the Hora is up at basically the topmost part of the island, and then Scala's down as your entry point. I don't think there's any other way to enter besides through Scala. So, and then we have this little map that we actually made for, we were thinking about using it in the film to help orient, and then we used it in a calendar. So it's a really nice map we had a graphic designer do. So here's the village of Scala where you enter, and there's the sense of the port. And then there's this road, and it literally, I think this is exactly how it goes. It just, uh, I mean, this is very accurate. You don't really need anything else besides this map in your set. It's very simple. And the village of Hora, there's the windmills, the monastery of St. John the Theologian. The cave of the Apocalypse is about halfway between the top and the bottom. And then over the hill and down on the other side is the monastery of the Annunciation. And this is the monastery that St. Amphilochios founded in 1937. So he was born in 1890 on Patmos. There's a lot to say. He had a very interesting life, but he knew from being a young child that he wanted to be a monk. And at the age of 17, he entered the monastery of St. John the Theologian. And then he studied a lot at the monastery. The monastery has a library of ancient manuscripts. He then had 10 years where he was kind of the steward or the monk in charge at the Cave of the Apocalypse, because the Cave of the Apocalypse, which is what they call it, by the way. It sounds a little funny to the American ear, but they'll say like, oh, we're having liturgy at the Apocalypse tomorrow. That's like the vernacular. And and anyway, he was the caretaker there, and that is part of the monastery of St. John the Theologian. So whoever takes care of the monastery is one of the monks from there. Also, an interesting thing about Patmos is that whoever is the abbot of the monastery is sort of like almost has the status of a bishop. Like they kind of report directly to the ecumenical patriarchate. There is a bishop, but I think like the abbot of the monastery is actually the one that all ecclesiastical blessing and authority of the island goes through. So the nuns will say, oh, we're going to ask the abbot for the blessing, even though they're not a skete. They have their own abbess, they have their own elder, but like everything kind of goes like as if he's the bishop. So that's an interesting, I don't know how to explain that exactly ecclesiastically. It's an anomaly, but it's a historical thing. It's been that way for I think centuries, and it may have something to do with the different occupations, because they had the Italian occupation, the German occupation, they had a lot of different things going on over here. And anyway, so it's a very much an island under the protection of St. John the Theologian, and there you will meet people named Theologia, Ioannis, Ioanna, Theologos. Like, I mean, his name is, any possible way that it can be. People are still named for the theologian, and his feast days are very widely celebrated there, obviously. And I was there to learn a lot about St. Amphilochios, so I learned a lot about him, but he, in his life, always pointed back to the theologian who he loved very much. And so that's also another lesson from the saints, right? Is that he had a very close relationship to St. John the theologian. Um, what else am I missing about this orientation to the island? I'm trying to think. It's another thing, like when what do you call it, when the boats, the ferries come, but like the tourist ferries, they come, they take big buses from like it's roughly after Pascha until October, and people, like boats that will have up to like 20,000 people on them. I'm not kidding. Will stop in the harbor, and it's really hard to imagine because you can't imagine that 20,000 people actually get off and explore the island, but they will go
An
into
island with an island with 3,000 residents
yes.
hosts 20,000 pilgrims at once.
Yes. And they'll come, and the Cave of the Apocalypse, of course, is a major site, and it has a parking lot for, I don't know, about 20 cars. So it's, imagine that. And then the Monastery of the Theologian, which technically has no parking lot because it's up at the top of this hill. So they host a lot of visitors. That's a huge part of the island's economy, and a huge part of the monasteries, their offering is to keep these places open. They have a beautiful museum at the Monastery of St. John the Theologian, and they have a library which is mostly restricted to, it's like you can see it on appointment, but it's mostly restricted to scholars of various manuscripts. um, okay, so I'm going to share about a few of the saints associated with the island. We talked about a couple of them, but I'll tell you more about the establishment of the monastery. So, of course, St. John the Theologian was exiled there, and I chose this icon, or it's a little pixelated, but any icon showing him in a cave, because this is where the cave was, and with his scribe Prochoros. That's another name that you'll find on the island, or there's monks that often will have the name of Prochor in the monastery. So this is where that happened, and then Saint Christodolos is another very, very important one, and you can actually see they did a beautiful job in this icon of depicting the monastery somewhat accurately. And there's like a little mosaic of Saint John the Theologian over the doorway, and that is there. And they have this bell tower, which is accurate to the way his bell tower is. So Saint Christodolos lived in the 12th century. He wanted to found a monastery. At this time, Patmos, which is just a rock, it's not, it was dry, it was barren, and it was overtaken by pirates. And so there was no one living there. I don't, and I believe, it's hard to say right now, but I believe at the time that St. John lived there, there was no one living there, and it was also a rock, and it was also very barren and a desolate place. But fast forward to the 12th century, St. Christodolos is asking for the blessing to start a monastery, and he's given the island of Patmos. Sure, you can start a monastery in Patmos, which is really interesting because, of course, it's a dangerous place because pirates hang out there. So the first thing they do is they build the monastery, which it's not the exact top of it's not the exact highest point on the two parts of the island, but it's essentially the largest. It's the, well, I don't know what the appropriate word, but it's like where the Acropolis would be, right? It's the top place that could be inhabited, and they build it there, and they build it like a fortress, and they build it with these like high castle walls and these little slit windows and these areas that you can imagine someone pouring hot oil over an invader, because they needed to do such a thing in order to protect the monastery. And so apparently pirates would still land there for a long time and would rush up the hill and try to attack the monastery. But over time, because of the monastery settling there, it became a peaceful place. The monastery protected the island, and so over time, people settled there. Originally, the north part of the island was for the families of the builders that came to build the monastery and build the community. And so the south part of the island was just for men and the monks, and the women and their families would stay on the north part of the island. And then over time, as it became more settled and more inhabited, there was a blessing to expand and live on, the families now live on all parts of the island. But it kind of had some of that Athonite spirit for a while, that they kept the families separate from the monastic side. So Saint Christodolos is also much loved and venerated on the island. Um, and then our saint, Saint Amphilochios, and I put his last name because there's another Amphilochios that we'll talk about in a second. So sometimes you'll see Saint Amphilochios Macris. And so he was canonized in September 2018. He lived through a lot of interesting times on the island with occupation. He was exiled from the island a number of times by the Italians. He was a missionary. He was in Crete. He was in Africa. He was a friend and a deacon, a young deacon at the time of his friendship and spiritual mentorship with Saint Nectarios of Egina. He knew many of the saints of the islands, Saint Philotheos Zervakos. They were friends as well. So he had this amazing life and founded a monastery there on Patmos, as well as, I believe, an orphanage on Rhodes and some monasteries there. And he worked a lot with lay women catechists, and many of them became nuns in one of the monasteries over time. And mostly, he had a very simple life as a spiritual father. That was I think his biggest legacy, is he was just a very loving spiritual father to all who came to him. And he was tireless in hearing confessions and teaching people about confession, teaching people about the church. And he also had a big missionary zeal, and he would travel throughout the Dodecanese, and probably in some more rustic ways of travel than we have today even. So I don't, I even find the ferry a little rough sometimes. And I was thinking about him a lot on this journey, and just thinking about what kind of boats was he traveling in, and constantly going between the islands to minister to people. So really a tireless labor, but like St. Nicholas and some other monastic and ascetic saints that we know about, he knew from a young age there was a holiness that he had and a desire for God. And like St. Nicholas, they say that he did not breastfeed on Wednesdays and Fridays, and the fast days of the church. And it's so hard to imagine this, but that's the kind of holiness, that mark of holiness that he had throughout his entire life. And there was never any question that what he was going to do with his life, but to be a monk. And then then I wanted to mention St. Gavrila, who was canonized last Tuesday. And yes, oh, it's so good to see that book. I loaned mine, like many people. I loaned mine 20 years ago, and it's been out of print since then.
This happens to belong to Georgia Mamalakis, and she's still waiting for it back. But
Well,
they just reprinted it, so I got the latest copy, and
oh, good.
I'm gonna get it back shortly.
I'm waiting to get the latest copy, but yes, I'm so happy to see her canonized. It brought me so much joy. Reading her book, over 20 years ago now, made a big impact on my life. And I love her so much. And of course, I didn't remember until rereading last week about her that she was tonsured by St. Amphilochios in the monastery of the Annunciation. And she was tonsured with another sister by the name of Thomais. So it's a nice connection that I feel with her. And also, that St. Amphilochios was her spiritual father for a time. And then she actually ended her life on the island of Leros nearby. And so, next time, if God wills that I ever get to go back to that part of the world, I would love to also visit there and see where St. Gavrila was. But I'm very excited that we are going to now be able to venerate her, and also that her book will be in print and in circulation. We'll get to learn more about her life. Another person I want to mention is Metropolitan Callistos Ware. He was also a spiritual child of St. Amphilochios. He reposed a year ago, and he was tonsured a monk at the monastery of St. John the Theologian. So he has a very strong connection to the island of Patmos, and many of his friends and spiritual children, because of this, also have a relationship with Patmos. So when you're on the island, and you often run into people or mentions of Metropolitan Callistos as well. And then this is Metropolitan Amphilochios Tsukos, and this is why we have to say Makris or Tsukos, because Metropolitan Amphilochios Tsukos is, I don't know if he was born on Rhodes, but he was a spiritual child of St. Amphilochios. He was actually in attendance of the feast day last month. He's elderly now. He's retired to the island of Rhodes, but he was a metropolitan famously in New Zealand, and did a lot of missionary work in Oceania or around New Zealand. So really beautiful, holy person. And he tries to, whenever his health allows, travel back to Patmos for the feast days of St. Amphilochios and St. John the Theologian.
We, if I may add just another connection with Father Theodore. So we were classmates. We were the two Theodores, and in '88 we had the great blessing to spend 6 weeks in Greece. We were studying at University of Thessaloniki in the language program, the Aristotelian School of Modern Languages, to improve our Greek. But we played hooky, and 6 of us, Father Foti Dumont was another one. We went to the Holy Mountain, and our experience there in Greece led 4 of the 6 to return after we graduated and live in Greece. We went back to Thessaloniki, but Father Ted and Stacy, just Ted and Stacy, with only their first child at the time, went to the island of Thasos, right? Or
they went to Rhodes.
Not Rhodes, not Thasos, but went to Rhodes, and were with a cousin of Stacy's, Father Christodolos, who is we've had more than once as a speaker on our Wednesday night studies. And then the desert storm happened, and Stacy and Ted's family did not feel at all comfortable with them being so close. Rhodes being very, very close to the rest of the Middle East, and so they came and lived with us for 3 months. We lived together, and that was a wonderful experience. But we heard many of the stories about Father Amphilochios from Ted, who was his driver at times, and there with Father Christodolos.
Yes. Wow. Thank you for filling in some of those gaps, because I knew that Father Theodore or Father Ted and Stacy had been there, but I didn't know about the other complications and yeah. So he's a much loved metropolitan. I don't know a lot about his life story, but I know the Petitsis family is very close. Father Christodolos Papadeus is very close to them. And because it turned out, I didn't set up my itinerary. I was just trying to follow that of my friend. And I found out that we were flying into Rhodes, and then we were going to take the ferry to Patmos. And so last month when we were doing this, I had called ahead and I said, Metropolitan Amphilochios had really given us a blessing to make the film, and had, prayed for us, and he was supposed to be there and be interviewed, but his health prevented him from being there in 2019. So I said, can I, come and show him the film during our little layover in Rhodes? And so I did. I was able to get a taxi and drive to where he was, and get to meet him and show him the film as it was finalized. So that was a big blessing. But yeah, I look forward to knowing more about his life, and also about the spirituality of the island of Rhodes, because there's obviously a lot there too. So this picture is it shows you the port of Scala, and this little, is it called an isthmus, I believe? That's the only thing connecting the north and the south parts of the island. So this is exactly where the break between the north and the south is. And so the large ferry boats, they all land right here on this at this concrete pad, this harbor. And this photo is from 2019. A few things have changed a little bit in the shape of the harbor, but basically this is where the boats land, and then this is the the downtown area where a lot of the tourist activity is, the shops and everything. Um, yeah, so that's Scala, and I think that's a good introduction to that. There's different hotels and things. A very convenient place to stay when you end up going. Um, and then this is part of Kora, and it's hard to show you like a photo, but I wanted to try to have a photo that kind of gave you a sense of like the narrow winding passages and the way the doors are. It's very steep, very windy. There, it turns out there are maps, but I didn't know that, and I just I tried to make my way through and find things, which was a lot of fun, actually. I mean, it just feels like you're just on a grand adventure in this, um, the life-size castle you've always wanted to explore, of getting to go through these winding streets and the whole part of Hora. I have another picture that will show more of it, but it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so like they can't change a lot. They can't do a lot of remodeling. They can't, you know, fix things up in a different way. They really have to maintain this character. And it's just unlike any other village I've been to. So I love it. Let's see if I can get to, okay, this is the cave. So let me skip one there. No. Okay, here. So I'm sorry, I have even more photos, but this shows the monastery of St. John the Theologian, and then Hora is built right up around it. So all of those winding passageways are here among these houses. And there's no like, oh, I'm just gonna, walk straight up to the monastery. You have to know which paths and which like squares connect with other squares. And also you're always hearing motorbikes come through, and you're like, wait, I just went up like 14 steps. Are they coming this way? Do they go downstairs? And then they like turn a corner and they're parked up along the side. And so I always was laughing about how the people on the motorbikes, they really have to know which parts are bikeable and which parts are going to end in a dead end with stairs. And it's just, it's beautiful and, very charming to me. And yet I was looking at, some of the elderly people that are coming out of their front doors and thinking, how are their knees bearing this? How are they living here? This is the most incredible thing, that they live in such a steep, kind of mountain goat environment. Really impressive. So that's this gives you a little bit of the sense of both the landscape and also, you know, how much of a fortress the monastery is. So I'm going to go back and I'll show you some pictures from the cave. So this is on the right, in the interior is a 2019 photo. On the left is a 2023 photo. They just finished this ramp to the door here. And when I was there 4 years ago, there was a different entrance up above. So this is a big project that was just completed. So when you would go and you would park, you would walk down this ramp and then go into the cave here. And this building is built over the cave, the actual cave. And there's another chapel. This chapel that you're seeing on the right is the chapel of Saint Anna, or Saint Anne. And then the rest of the part of the cave, I will look to see if I have another photo that shows you more of the rock. But it's to the right. And so what happens, and this is true of a lot of pilgrimage sites, is that, they'll build a church or a larger structure over something. And so it won't have that, character of what it was when St. John was there. But this is basically, it's essentially like a small little monastery. It has different cells and workshop rooms and a kitchen and things like that, so that monks can live there and take care of and watch over the cave, and a small, like very, very small exhibition, like with some photos of how it's progressed through the years and information. So that's what I have in this presentation of the photos of the cave. And there's a place in the cave, and forgive me that I didn't get it in here, but I'll try to see if I can bring that up maybe when there's questions at the end. There's a place there where there's a railing that comes out from the rock. And there's a story that when St. Amphilochios was serving at the cave, a child saw like a vision of St. John kneeling at the place where he received the revelation, because that there's a understanding that it happened in this spot. And he told somebody, there's a man kneeling there, don't walk there. The child was like worried that somebody was going to walk on the man or run into him. And from that time, St. Amphilochios had this little railing installed to protect that space where St. John may, from time to time be. And so it was a really special story about why they're, and people will go and they'll it's the tradition is that he even, like he hit his head on the rock there, and they will go and they will kneel and pray with their head against the rock in the place that St. John was. So they have liturgies there probably every day. I'm not sure, but I have both times I've been on the island, I've been able to go to a liturgy there, which is really special. And then right above the cave, so actually on the left here, on the left lower white building, that is the cave complex. And then straight in the middle up at the top, you see St. John the Theologian Monastery and the village of Hora. And then to the right, this kind of stair-step white building is called the Patmos, and it's an ecclesiastical school, kind of a vocational seminary for young men. And many people to this day are still being educated there. Like, I mean, they have a small student body now, but I just recently heard, people will say, oh, my first ecclesiastical school is the Patmos on Patmos, and then I've gone on to Halki or Thessaloniki, etc. And then so Bishop Apostolos, who is just, I believe he was just enthroned, is it in New Jersey? He went to Patmos. Actually, he was born and raised on Rhodes, and this was his ecclesiastical school. So, and these young men, they during their time there, they learn to chant, and they chant at the Cave of the Apocalypse during their time in the school. So it's a very special formation.
Thomaida, I did while you were speaking get a picture of
Okay.
the cave and the way the chapel inside of the cave is. Would you like? Should we show that?
Sure. Let's do it. And I realize I'm going a little long, so I'll stop my share and then go ahead. Yes, thank you. This is a perfect photo, which I don't have, of course. So there you can see on the far right the railing that is there. And then there's a little silver space right next to it, and people pray there and put their head there. And the whole iconostasis, yes, thank you, is under the cave, but you can stand there. Like I stood in that part of the cave both times when I went to service there. It's not so low that you can't stand. But the priest, he doesn't have a deacon's door on the right side, only on the left side. And sometimes he does do the proscomidi inside there actually, but there's another space on the left side of the chapel of St. Anna, which is right next to it. So it's hard to imagine, but this is two churches in one right here that we're looking at.
And our new deacon, Emmanuel, who had gone to Patmos, I think with Dr. Timothy and the St. Helen pilgrimage group, I think he said that, so is this place right here, there's a kind of place in the rock where it's believed that Prochorus was writing, and that maybe this location here is where St. John also received the revelation. Yeah.
Yes.
Where is the place where the rock is split in three, where it designates the Trinity?
Yeah, you were pointing at it. It's that space there. Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Back to you.
Okay. And I'll speed it up a little bit. This is really joyful.
No, you don't have to. And even if we have to have you back a second time to finish up, that's the way this particular study has gone. It took us 4 times to get through the Holy Land, so Jerusalem and Palestine. So
yeah, my goodness, of course. Okay, so this is Evangelismos Monastery. This is a drone shot that we had from 2019. So you can see the bell tower actually above the entrance really mimics the one of St. John the Theologian, which is nice, which is up on the hill. And that's the entrance. So you can enter on the left there, you come through, walk down the steps, and there's the Catholicon. But they have about 40 or more sisters there. It's a really beautiful and robust monastery. And this photo, which is really nice, it can show you, because generally you don't go back into this area. I mean, you can with there's the ossuary where you would venerate the place where the saints' relics were. Where's my mouse? Can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay, so it's right here, the ossuary. This is a little chapel dedicated to Saint Luke, and I forget the dedication of this one, but there were all these hermitages that actually predated the monastery and predated Saint Amphilochios's time there. So this part of the monastery is more ancient. This part down on the cliff, and this is the cell of Saint Amphilochios when he passed away. This is where he lived, and the Church of Saint Anthony is underneath. So there, I actually picked up a book when I was there, trying to see if I can place it really fast. Yes. Anyway, I'll get it down in a minute, but it's about all the hermitages of Patmos on both the North and the South Island, and there's just hundreds. So in that time between when, I believe, when Saint Christodolos, made it inhabitable again by making it safe, many, many, many monastics had little hermitages all over the island. And this place where this now very large monastery is started out with some of those very small hermitages. And there's local stories, like they know, oh, this saint was here, this elder lived here, in this century, and it's really beautiful. And now they're carrying that on with a large monastery. And they famously they paint icons. They had a sister, Olympiada, who has passed now, but she was a student under, I believe, Photius Contaglou, and she taught all the sisters how to paint icons, and so they continue to paint icons. And they have other labors, but that's one of the main ones. And they also, I asked them, what are your, main works? And they said gardening, because their garden is absolutely beautiful, and it's like a paradise in this courtyard with birds and trees and flowers and cats. And then they also garden up here, you can see, for their sustenance. And then they have a garden down below that I believe they would take a car to get to too. So they have a large agricultural operation, beautiful chanting, yeah, just sewing, a lot of different work, but typical of many monasteries, and very active monastery. And because they're not really associated directly with, a place that St. John was, they avoid some of the tours. So tourists still come, but not to the same degree that they are up at the top monastery and up at the cave. And so slightly more peaceful existence here. This is the entry of the monastery. So totally different angle, but beautiful mosaic. And it when I was there in September, this, I was thinking about all these comparisons, and this was flowering with purple flowers, and it was just nice to see it at a different season, and see changes that had taken place. And then something else I wanted to share about the island of Patmos, and it's probably true of many, many islands, but it was my, again, this is the only Greek island I've been to. So I was learning about the monopatia, which are paths that, they're written about and they referred to Saint Amphilochios would walk them. Before there was the road, they had these donkey, trails. Basically, you take your donkey down to Scala, meet the boat, get something, go fishing, whatever, and then you would bring your donkey, lead your donkey up. And this was the pathway. It's very rugged. I think it's intentionally has a lot of stones and textures so that you don't slip. There's some traction, can also be dangerous, but they're all over the island. And on my first trip, when we were making the film and we were filming for 4 days, we were so rushed, we really had to just drive, and we had to keep our appointments and keep everybody fed. And so it was just a very busy time. But this visit, the person that was my host, was explaining to me about the monopatia, and I would say, okay, I want to go down to Scala for Vespers. Like, how do I get there? And she would she would be like, this is how you find the monopatia. And it was so incredible to rely on these roads instead of the new roads, because they kind of crisscross or they pass each other. But when you're on these paths, you don't really see the busy road, and that's so different than it is in the States. If you want to walk somewhere in our cities, oftentimes you're having to walk right alongside a busy 4-lane traffic road or larger, right? And in this case, when I said I wanted to walk, I ended up having this, blissful experience of getting to really be surrounded by nature and flowers, and also walking on a path that is as old as probably St. John's time, on the island, and getting to feel that I'm walking in the footsteps of St. Amphilochios, St. Christodolos, and St. John, because these ancient paths are formed by those who walk them, and that's how they become the path that everyone chooses to make, more built up and more cultivated. And so it was just an incredible thing that, several days later I said, well, I want to, how do you get to this beach, like this other side? I'd really like to go see that part of the island. And I didn't have a car available. But where I was staying was very convenient to Evangelismos, the Annunciation Monastery. So it was exactly where I wanted to be. Um, and she said, "Oh, you go up and then you go down and then, and make sure to like look for this restaurant and then turn left." And I long for those times, when you're being given those verbal directions and those little hand-drawn maps. And it was just incredible. And it just felt very really a good retreat in that sense of finding your way and asking somebody for directions, and seeing that it was indeed the path that had been walked before you. And it was really incredible. And another thing that I found interesting, and I kind of joked about with my host, is that from where we were, which was kind of down on the far side of Cora, and our neighborhood was called the Holy of Holies. So I don't know how it got that name, but whenever we get in a taxi, or if I needed a ride home, or I was telling somebody, I would just say I meant the Holy of Holies. They said, "Oh, okay," and I thought that was really charming as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I found is that in order to get anywhere, the best thing, the first thing was to walk up into Chora, and then you would find your path down to the other places. I just thought that was really amazing. Like, it was never like, oh, I'm gonna walk around the side, because walking up, of course, is really strenuous and very steep. And I kept thinking, there's got to be an easier way than going straight up for 10 minutes first and being out of breath and having to stop so many times. But no, indeed, walking up and going up to the monastery of St. John was always the fastest way. And I thought that was a very interesting lesson and metaphor for my time on Patmos. Let's see what else I've prepared for you.
Beautiful.
So as I said, there are many different hermitages, and this is the hermitage of Prophet Elias. And this is on the actual tallest point of the two islands. And on my last evening on Patmos, we got to go up there at sunset. And I mean, this is from my camera roll, but it doesn't, it looks unearthly, the blue. But anyway, so this is they would go up here and celebrate the feast of Prophet Elias up at this church. But it's also a place that people come and enjoy the sunset and the sunrise from as well. It's really incredible. But it's just an example of, you could live on Patmos your whole life, and every day, there's a reason to celebrate going to this church, or a season when you go to that church, or a saint that you venerate over there. There's in a way, although it's small and rural and, a backwater without an airport, like there's so much richness to the island. And another thing I should say, you don't see it so well in this one, but Saint Amphilochios, really, he is a very ecologically minded saint, and he encouraged people to plant trees. The island of Patmos is very dry, and rocky, and yet it's fertile enough to have trees if people, cultivate them and take care of them. And he believed very strongly in this, and he really, really encouraged that. And they even call the little fir trees that grow there Amphilochis. They have that name after him. So I wanted to offer, so this gives a little sense, this is from an April picture. This gives a sense of how it can be very green, and some of the places where trees are growing. There are two books that I read that helped me draw close to the island of Patmos, but also to the saints. So Patmos, A Place of Healing for the Soul by Peter France. He's an Englishman. He's passed now, but he and his wife were friends with Metropolitan Callistos Ware, and he was a BBC correspondent of some kind. He did a bunch of documentaries for the BBC. He's a very good writer, and he wrote this beautiful book about his time when he and his wife they did buy a house on the island of Patmos and lived there at least seasonally for many, many years. And through that experience, he became Orthodox over time, and they had a relationship with other English people that were associated with the island, like Metropolitan Callistos and with Saint Amphilochios and Metropolitan Amphilochios. So it's a very sweet book, kind of a travel log, but also a spiritual journey at the same time. And after reading that book, which I did right before we came in 2019, I realized, I kept walking around the island going, well, that's just like Peter France says, because he described it so well. So it's a really good, vivid depiction of it. It gives you, it's like, if you're an armchair traveler, I highly recommend that book. It's very sweet. And then Precious Vessels of the Holy Spirit is a compilation of 20th century elders, their lives and their sayings. And there is a chapter about St. Amphilochios in there and some of his sayings. And so that's why I recommend that book. It's not about Patmos in particular, but it is one of the better options we have right now in English for reading about St. Amphilochios. And there are some books in the works. The nuns at the monastery that I showed you, they have written a couple of books about the saint. And I know that there are people working on English translations, but they're not quite available yet. I wish for everyone to be able to be close to a monastery like Essex, where they venerate Saint Sophrony and Saint Silouan, a monastery like on Patmos, where they venerate Saint John and Saint Christodolos and Saint Amphilochios so closely. And then our own, in the States, we have monasteries where they really know the life of Yerenda Ephraim, and and Saint Joseph the Hesychist and Eldris Macrina. There are so many, they can teach us a lot just by being close to them and going to the feast days and seeing what that's like. And we don't have to go so far to experience it. There are communities near us where they really hold the memory of those saints well. And hopefully, I'm at the parish of St. John the Baptist, here at the parish of Saints Constantine and Helen. These people lived a very long time ago. It's hopefully we do this also for them. But it is a special thing, of course, to be at the monastery that maybe they founded, or the community that they really knew that person in an everyday way, and they walked the paths and they prayed there. So that's a lesson that I take from it. And it teaches me because, I still feel like I was called to participate in this adventure, this work, but I didn't know St. Amphilochios. I came to it just with an open mind. And so I'm still learning about him, and I'm still drawing close to him through working on his films and asking his help, help us finish, help us overcome this obstacle, help us find the right next step. To even with technological things, I'm in the middle of a formatting problem that I need to ask his help for. So I'm trying to always grow closer to him. So I just think that that's a really special gift, and we can all participate in that.
They are in Christ. They are with us.
Mm-hmm.
Death has been destroyed by the Lord, and he reveals this in the lives of the saints. He desires, he glorifies them because they glorified him.
Yes. So I didn't plan the itinerary, but it was I was telling Father, I think right before we started, that I was there in April for his feast day before. It's the 16th of April. A lot of times it's not celebrated so largely like the main feast, because even though that's the day of his repose, it can be Holy Week, it can be Bright Week, or like this year it was Pascha. So very difficult to invite your friends over to celebrate St. Amphilochios when you're celebrating the resurrection of Christ. So in September, on the 19th is the day of the translation of his relics. And also there's beautiful symmetry there, like, that God allowed that his feast of the translation of his relics would be 1 week before St. John the Theologian, and just a few days after the Feast of the Cross, because it just means that like the month of September is just buzzing with celebration and joy on the island. And um, I got to attend the vigil on the 18th. They did a all-night vigil with Artoclasia, and the monks from the monastery up at the top of the hill come down and they chant and they serve. And then the next day there were 5 bishops. I don't even know who they all were. It was beautiful. That came in from different islands, different parts of Greece, and many priests and lay people came from Athens and from different parts of Greece to attend for the feast day. So that was also a very big lesson, just to see what is it like to be on more of a remote island, and have, the saint celebrated, and how do people come out of the woodwork to be part of that. And they didn't have a liturgy over at this church or that church. They all came together for the liturgy, for the saint, and they made, the huge Artoclasia with his icon painted on it, or the Coliva with his icon on it. And they also make huge Artoclasia, the largest I've seen of anywhere in the world. I think they're like 2 feet across or something crazy. It's really, really beautiful. That monastery is so beautiful. And so I was really blessed to get to participate in that. And then yeah, so that was my recent time on Patmos, and I thank God that I got to go back. I never really dreamed it would happen so quickly after the film being completed, because I thought, well, it'll just take some time to get back there. I'm not going to have a chance. And I really thank God that I got to go and not be quote unquote working, and that I could, get to know the island a little better, explore, try to take photos and walk, and see more of it on foot than I did the first time, because we were on a tight schedule. So that was a big blessing. And I'm a big fan of, like, if you're going to go on pilgrimage, if you're going to go to the Holy Land, I pray and hope that you will get to go visit the Dead Sea and float in the Dead Sea, and experience the healing mud of that place. And I hope you'll get to taste the cucumbers and the tomatoes of Palestine, and that area, because they taste unlike anything else in the world, and the hummus is better and the falafel is better. It's all better. So I would never say, like, oh, skip that, just because, so that you can pack all the holy sites in. You need to eat the food, and dip your toes into the Aegean in this case, and try to eat some of the seafood on the island if you can. So those are things that I really treasure about pilgrimage, is that we don't ignore the natural beauties, and some of the touristy parts, because there's a reason they're touristy parts, is they have amazing, maybe it's an artisan, or a, produce from that island, or some other natural wonder. And so I really encourage that always. And I'm glad I had a little more time for that this time. And then I want to close by sharing about another part of our work. And we started this originally in order to, oh, in order to be a Kickstarter gift for our post-production Kickstarter. But now we're in our 5th year of publishing this calendar, and I actually have it right here, that I can kind of show it to you. So this year what you're seeing on the screen is and I'll make myself bigger, I guess, in a minute so I can show this to you. What you're seeing on the screen is the proof of the old Julian calendar version. We do a Julian calendar version and a new calendar version, because obviously we have people on both calendars. And actually I was laughing, because I was thinking about how a lot of the sites that we've depicted in our 5 years have been places that are on the old calendar, like Serbia is on the old calendar. And so how proper that we should have an old calendar version of the calendar. So we print 2 versions. This came out of and here's where I will stop the share so I can show it to you more closely. This was a concept of Dr. Timothy. So I think you're going to get to meet him in this series at the end. And he is such a brilliant and innovative thinker. And when I was saying I kind of, I love calendars and I've always wanted to depict something more than icons because we have such a beautiful faith and I want to show it in a calendar on the wall, but like I have icons, I want it to be different. I want it to be places. And he said, sure, sure, yeah, let's make a calendar. Because we had all this footage. We had footage from Patmos, we had footage from Jerusalem. So I was very inspired. I was like, I finally have images that are gorgeous and I want to share them. And he said, sure, make a calendar, but months are kind of arbitrary. I feel like we should just like make it, like liturgical seasons. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, well, I'm a professor and I have my students for 10 weeks at a time, but I have to keep flipping all these pages, January, February, March. And I don't really have a sense of like, how long are they even in my hands? Like how long are they here? And so he's like, wouldn't it be great if we could see it all on one page? What am I actually working with here? 10 weeks, what does that look like? And so he's like, I wish the church was the same where you could like see Great Lent on one spread. And I got off the phone and I thought, well, that's not going to work. Like a piece of paper is only so large. How can we do this? But then, um, thank God, I just kind of started playing with the idea and we made this, which we love this format. And actually Deacon Manoli and Melissa have helped us a lot in editing and, checking to make sure for accuracy. They're wonderful help. So it's, hard to see on this, but this is the calendar of liturgical seasons. It always starts on the Feast of Christmas on the new calendar. And then we show, the first page is called Christmas to Triodion. And it's a festal period. And you see like we just shade the traditional fast days. We don't put the rules because we know that people do it a little differently. And we don't want to clutter the calendar with a lot of information. Like we don't have a saint every day. We don't have the ecclesiastical readings. And this is because there are lots of resources for that. And what we want this to be is a calendar that maybe you can hang it in your kitchen and, put the family's schedule on it, or maybe you can meal plan with it. And so we want there to be a lot of free space to write in the services at your own church. But anyway, so the first page is Christmas to Triodion. The second page is always the path, we call it Journey to Pascha. It's always Great Lent through Holy Week. And then you flip the page for Pascha and the season to Pentecost. And then Pentecost, and we call this page Summer Saints because it varies in length. And usually a lot of those big great martyrs in July, and St. Paisius, St. Sophrony, but also like Great Martyr Marina, Great Martyr Panteleimon, Great Martyr, I think Vladimir, New Martyr Elizabeth. There's lots of big saints in July. And so we call this one Summer Saints. And sometimes there's an Apostles' Fast, but for us on the new calendar next year, no Apostles' Fast.
No one's complaining.
And then we call August Panagia's month because it's dedicated to Panagia, and right in the middle we have our beautiful feast of the Dormition. Church New Year, another festal season that's quite long, and this is where we're at right now. And then Path to Nativity is the final page. And we always end on the new calendar on the 31st of December. So if you decided you were going to use a different calendar next year, we've seen you all the way through to the end of the year. And on the old calendar, it starts January 1st, but ends on January 7th, their Feast of Nativity. So this has been a great joy and a labor of love. We sell it on Etsy, we wholesale it to bookstores, and it actually has allowed us to fund our mission and our vision. And so it's been really also a wonderful excuse to learn and to highlight different places of pilgrimage. And this year, it's all medieval Serbia, all churches built by the kings and queens of Serbia from the Nemanja family, which is the family that produced Saint Sava. And if you haven't read Saint Sava, which I am new to the story of Saint Sava, it is it's just an epic story. He had a really mythological life, almost like Saint Eusthathios is another one of those that you just can't imagine things that happened. And Saint Sava of Serbia is just a giant and a wonderful, wonderful patron. So we really enjoyed getting to know him better and learning about the architecture of Serbia. And this was a tour that Dr. Tim and I went on with, also one of my goddaughters went with us, and the architect Andrew Gould, and it was all organized through Father Ilya Gotlinski and his program, which I think Father Theodore you're very familiar with. Um,
Yes.
yeah, and it was phenomenal. It was just amazing. I learned so much. Very tiring, but very much worth it. So every year we've done, the first year was the Holy Land, the second year was Patmos, because we had all that footage that I was telling you about. Then we did St. Herman of Alaska, then Ireland, and now Serbia. And we'll see where God leads us, and hopefully we get to keep making
So
it.
Serbia is for the upcoming year because
Yes.
we're still in Ireland. His Eminence gave every one of the clergy in our metropolis as a gift your calendar. He
Yeah.
loved it so much, and with Deacon Emmanuel, as we're referring to him now, it's hard not to call him Manoli, but Deacon Emmanuel. I'm certain our bookstore will carry them from now on. So.
That's wonderful. We really appreciate it. It's such a joy to make it and to share it. And I think it's a very good tool for all of us it's something that we carry around in our heads anyway. Well, can we have a wedding then? Should we celebrate, should we plan the dinner for Father there? Should we do this? And you know that there are seasons you should just avoid because they're too
Mhm.
busy or they're fasting or there's something else more important going on. And so this kind of helps us to do that. And it also it's just creates a point of conversation. So it just brings me a lot of joy to be a part of this project and also to get to talk about pilgrimage. So I'll end there.
Thomaida, what a blessing it's been for us to have you tonight and to travel with you, to go reminisce on your trip to Patmos. And we've learned so much. You did such a wonderful job of preparing your presentation and then presenting it to us. I'd like to still, even though we've run over just a little bit, I'd like to give everyone a chance to ask any questions that they might have. A few people did sign off, but especially those with young children, I noticed. So, but at this point, I'm going to open the view back up to gallery. And you don't have to raise a hand, but if anybody has any questions at all, please, or comments, feedback for Thomaida, please.
Are there guest houses on Patmos at the monasteries? I came in a little bit late, and so,
Yeah.
but just in terms of, now I want to go to Patmos.
Good. That's my goal. I think that the monastery, they do have a little room. When I went this time, because I arranged it a little bit on the later side. I mean, I gave them 2 weeks notice, something like that. They were booked. So they don't have a lot of space. I would say they only have room for probably like 8 people is my guess, or maybe 10. And there are lots of other Airbnbs, very economical. I mean, there's other places where you can go where it's like very expensive. The Patmos is pretty economical. And I can talk to you a little bit offline about like where I stayed exactly, because there's an option too that could be an Airbnb that would be available. But yeah, there's hotels and things, and some things in Chora, which are about a 15 to 20-minute walk to the monastery. So it's easy to kind of get around there.
I'll
How
give you my
many
information. Go ahead.
how many fathers are at the monastery right now of St. John?
I would guess, and I don't have as close of a relationship there, so I'm not aware so much of how large they are, but I would say there seem to be, I would say 14 to 20, because
Okay,
they're all kind of like, they're serving over here and they're down
right.
at the kitchen. So it's hard to track exactly how many there are. Oh, and since I'm so glad we went up to the monastery again, because I wanted to mention that the skull of St. Thomas is there. And so we just celebrated him. And if you know anyone named Thomas, that's a wonderful place to venerate, the relics of St. Thomas, is on the island of Patmos.
These are monasteries. Father Sergius, when he spoke a little bit about the Holy Mountain, he was saying that all monasteries are these treasury warehouses for the church. It's where the relics of saints just tend to collect, and the miracle working icons and all of these things. But he was just marveling at, when you go to the Holy Mountain, it's overwhelming that, every monastery has, huge miracle working icons of the Mother of God, and so many riches, and their reliquaries are just so. So it can almost be too much. My cousin Andrew, who was with us on when we talked about the Holy Mountain, he at some point he said, "I can't see any more bones. I just can't."
Oh, totally. Yeah. You have to like kind of prepare yourself for it.
Yeah.
And I've often, talked to my father confessor about it before or after, like how do I receive this, experience, or how do I prepare myself for this experience? Because you do start to feel like, okay, well, I'll just get in line and venerate this, and I'll just get in line and venerate that.
Right.
And you're kind of wondering if that's how it should go, or if, and it's, there's you might be able to get some good guidance on how to approach it. But I think that it does show you that we really live in a reality of abundance too, abundance of grace, abundance of saints, abundance of intercessors. And I feel in the church, growing up in the United States too, that more books are being published, more saints are being come known, more wonder working icons are traveling. There's so much that we're given. I really feel blessed. I shared my email and my website. The email, I ended up with 2 S's in the word first, but that's because my S key is a little sticky right now. So please spell the word first appropriately. But if you are interested, sometimes I'm able to like help people, when they're thinking about going on a pilgrimage and planning it for themselves, offering some consultation for that. If you want to go to Ireland or Patmos or the Holy Land, a little, kind of giving you some tips on how to do it if you're doing it by yourself, if you're not going with a group. And also our website. So if you'd like to subscribe so that when the film comes out or you hear about, things about the calendar, you can be part of our subscription and news. So I welcome that.
I don't know if I shared with you, Thomaida, but our parish and many people who have known that I've gone to the Holy Land before, we were planning a pilgrimage to the Holy Land and even to St. Catherine's Monastery, and possibly even end in Cairo and see some places like in maybe Alexandria or something like that. This was going to be the end of February into March. And now, we have a war. We have to just put it in God's hands. And we were planning this. My first year that I came to Reading, 4 years ago, it was going to be early 2020, and COVID hit. And so we've waited all this time and put it together again. But he has a reason for it all, and I hope things. And I want to end, if we could, with prayer for the war and that hostilities would end quickly there. So because there are pilgrims that are still stuck there, besides all the tremendous suffering that's now happening and between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But again, thank you so much for your presentation, and I would love to have you on again, and maybe we even watch the film with you or something like that, and you can talk a little bit more about it when it comes out.
I'd love that. I'd love to have that opportunity. Thank you.
So we'll end with the dismissal hymn for the Holy Apostle and Evangelist John. And then we'll offer a prayer for peace in the Middle East yet again. O Apostle beloved of Christ our God, hasten to deliver a defenseless people. He that allowed thee to recline on his breast, receiveth thee bowing in intercession. Implore him, O theologian, to dispel the persistent cloud of the heathen, and ask for us his peace and great mercy. Lord, we thank you for this evening and for the wonders of the lives of your saints of Patmos, and the gift that you've given Thomaida to share this story in so many wonderful and beautiful ways. We ask that we remember what we've heard, and that it help us to see our lives as the pilgrimage that we are all making together from this life into your heavenly kingdom. We especially raise up to you this evening all those suffering in Israel, in Palestine, and we raise up to you the tragedy of this ongoing conflict that has broken out into war between some of the factions of those living there. Or in war, Lord, we know it's always the innocent who suffer the most. And there are so many people suffering now. So we ask and beg you to bring a speedy conclusion to this war. And through the intercessions of all the saints that we've spoken about today, Saint John, the theologian, Saint Christodolos, Saint Amphilochius, and your newly canonized Saint Gavrilia, through their intercessions, that those who can make a difference will come to see the folly of this ongoing conflict, and may be led to the way of peace, and to live once again in the way that glorifies you, and that you want us to live with each other on this earth. For you are the author of peace, the Prince of Peace, and you are the one who is our true King and Savior. And to you we give our praise and our thanks, now and forevermore. Amen. Thank you, everyone. I'm not positive about next week's talk. We may end with in the last Wednesday of October with Dr. Timothy, but I'm almost wondering now if we just don't continue to extend this, because there are many other places that we can still go, and people that we can have on to continue to talk about these journeys of faith and places of pilgrimage and grace. So I will let you know as soon as I figure out. One of the places that we were hoping to have represented was the Church of St. George, Carpatho-Russian Orthodox Church, and the Mer streaming icon, Kardiotisa. Father Mark always on Wednesday night does the Malevolent on that night. So if we have him, we're going to have to move it to a different night, maybe Thursday. I will let you know about that as soon as it's planned. So thank you again. Good night, everyone. Thomaida, what a joy. Thank you so.
Good night.
Good night. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.